Okay, so starting off, the topic of this, by the way, is resiliency. So we'll try to stick to this as best we can. I have a million questions for you, though, of course, and we can dive into this all day long. But just to back up a little bit, a couple of weeks ago, we were at the Fiera Robotics conference, press conference, and you mentioned that that farmers are facing generational challenges. I assume that means we're talking about Sigma, we're talking about the clean energy transition. What out of all of these generational challenges, what keeps you up at night? What are you looking forward to?
All of the above and more. And I think for me it feels deeper than before, even though I started my career when I was working my way through college at night school, working for a United States senator, when interest rates were 18 and 20%. And so, you know, I have that perspective, but the higher interest rates and higher cost of production, at the same time, we have so many commodities at the same time, with softening, chaotic markets. It's a very turbulent time, and it's also happening when a traditional generational change is going to happen anyway. And I feel that there are very long-term decisions that are being made in this particular atmosphere about where will our growth go. In the past, it's been bring more land in production, drill some new wells. And I feel like this is a turning point, but I also feel what has made California agriculture great and well known for innovation and quality and sustainability is the innovation spirit of the people on the farms and ranches, as well as having this unique public university, CSU system, and other aspects. We're very market-driven, as opposed to where I grew up, which was very commodity title-driven. Big difference there. And so I just feel that we're at a time where the innovation and technology just are going to keep going faster and faster and faster. Hopefully that keeps people in farming, because that makes it very exciting if you like adrenaline. But it's also very difficult to think about when you have the short-term kinds of turbulence right now, the longer-term decisions that could set your family's operations in a very different pathway going forward. I don't have a great answer for it, but I just feel that this is the most serious, changing atmosphere I've worked in my very long career, very long career.
Okay, great. I kind of want to keep on a few topical things here. Budget, of course, another great source of optimism right now, right? So you were there for the Great Recession. In the aftermath of that, some really tough decisions going for that. It's a lot different now, of course. Thank goodness. But how do you gauge the priorities for the program? Some of these programs are really important, very special to you. How do you prioritize the spending?
So first of all, I'm going to say, yes, this is a difficult budget year, but it's all about one-time funding. We had extraordinary circumstances that presented billions of dollars. That has never happened. I've never worked in an atmosphere with that happening over a short period of time, as opposed to, excuse me, my first almost 3 years, we were cutting core programs. I established a collaborative process with stakeholders so that we weren't making decisions about cuts when we were also making decisions about layoffs without input from stakeholders to help us with our priorities, that we could not set it in a vacuum. We tend to do that a lot in Sacramento. We have the answer, here it is, and we've got to have that engagement. This is a very different scenario, and because I am an optimist, which is about a belief and expectations grounded in reality, but I will never stop believing. I thank you so much. It's the allergy season with the wind. I feel that we have had an extraordinary opportunity to make investments that hopefully will prove out climate-smart agriculture, and we've seen tremendous momentum around that by a lot of people who would never apply for one of our incentive grants. We've invested in the livestock industry. The dairy families have been leaders in methane reductions on a global basis, that we were able to give incentives to prove out a business case. What we've done with Farm to School is exactly the perfect fit for what was up here. Starting at the youngest age, introducing from the youngest age possible the joy of fruits and vegetables and healthy eating and healthy lifestyle that will avoid those chronic diseases and the huge costs of health care that so many people towards the end of life are now proving out. It's not a sustainable system. So that kind of an investment and seeing the momentum around that, building out a marketplace to support local small scale, which has nothing to do with interfere with our global prowess. It's about making sure we've got resilience in that local system. We were able, with baseline funding, thanks to the First Partners advocacy as well, to establish 16 regional navigators to connect the local farming community with those school nutrition directors, which was hugely important because many of them don't know what's growing in their backyard, let alone how do I get the volume I need. And a very important part of these one-time funds was over $400 million put into kitchen equipment and culinary training. You can give kids a plate and tell them it's healthy, but if it's not getting eaten, it's not going to get you the outcomes you're looking for. This is a very holistic way of approaching improving health outcomes, the whole child outcomes, and it has a very strong component for experiential learning so that children can discover what it is to grow and where food comes from, as well as the environment that we're growing it in and changing climate. These are the kinds of things we've had in total across all of our agencies, just for sustainable agriculture, over $1 billion. Healthy soils, on-farm water use efficiency, livestock methane reduction, pollinator habitat, the Sustainable Ag Land Conservation Program through the Strategic Growth Council, almost $400 million invested in long-term easements on a voluntary basis, almost $500 million in the farmer program for engine replacement, over $200 million at the Energy Commission for food processing, energy efficiency, that has had faster payoffs for every one of the people that got those grants. Their return on the investment for that energy efficiency was less than half the time that they calculated that it would be. It's putting stuff on the ground and also investing in technical assistance, which will last much longer. It makes sure that everybody has access to the information how to do this. And I think the healthcare system and other institutional procurement, not just schools, will walk into this space, but it was like a panel before us that's helped building out the marketplace. Sorry for the long answer, but I'm pretty passionate about what we have done, and I'm grateful for it. I'm the only cabinet secretary that is a senior citizen, and the only one that's been there through really tough times. I'm the only one I spend half my time being grateful that we've had these dollars to spend, that we got to try to prove it out, and that we're being hopefully smart and strategic about where those investments are going. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Sorry. Stuart, you know this is what I'm like, right?
Would you say you're a career secretary? It's been 13 years, right? 14, 13?
That sounds like long enough. Don't answer that, my friends. Don't answer that.
Okay, back to budget. What is the scoop? What are we going to have for a bond?
Well, the negotiations started this weekend. Everyone, I'm sure by now, has seen the two-party agreement. The only commentary I'm going to provide is, wow, they found a lot of creative ways to push a lot of spending cuts and shift them to the greenhouse gas emission reduction fund. We'll see how that goes. So all of our one-time funding is gone for the next fiscal year. This is about protecting what we have in this current year. Farm to School has been proposed for a $10 million cut. The legislature, knowing it's a high priority, I'm quite certain, proposed reducing that by even more. We've lost funding for the refrigeration program, the nutrition incentive market match program, which is wildly popular. That's been shoved into in the two-party agreement to greenhouse gas emission reduction fund. There's no new funding for healthy soils. There's no new funding for livestock emission reductions. There's a lot of cuts. On the good news side, we had tremendous flooding in our fairly new animal lab down in Tulare County. It was flooded last year. We have full funding to completely restore that building, those facilities, and bring it back online. And we have current year funding for the fruit fly program, as well as proposed in the next year, current year, full funding for what we need, in addition to the authority to spend down the federal dollars for that program. So I look at the bright sides. There's also out of capital outlay. We have some very dangerous border stations because of traffic that's like, they were built for 45 years ago, and the traffic today just coming from Las Vegas. So Blythe right now is in line for over $99 million to start the construction process of a planning process that's been going on for 6 years. So that's where we are. As a state, we've got a big hole to fill because we're trying to fill 2 years of what we didn't know when tax returns were delayed to try to fix what we would have done differently last year, let alone in this current year.
So we've had a number of bond proposals that have come up over the last year or so. Sustainable agriculture, water, climate. I don't know if you have any inside discussions there you'd like to share, but I know that during one of the budget hearings, you said that these should be considered an investment for the future rather than, I believe you meant, backfilling for the current pains.
Yeah, and that's easy for me to say because the political pain is from the short-term pressure of, well, we really like this program. No matter how many times you say this is one-time dollars, it could be gone tomorrow. People build out expectations, they build out staff, they build out contracts. And so the things that I've seen that have been public so far, some of it will be the longer term investment and some of it is just to keep programs going and backfilling on other things. I think the climate bond, which the advocates tell me continues to pull very well, even in this climate. I think they're talking at a fairly reduced number compared to what it would have been a year ago. I wish there'd be more water built into that because one of the budget cuts that's proposed is a wipeout of all the water storage funding that has been set aside over our budget. So it's easy for me to think about this as the investment for the future. What's the return on investment going to be for the long term, as opposed to a whole bunch of smaller, let's do a bunch of pilot programs and see if it works. We've been through that phase, so what I'm working with my staff on is let's collect the data to show outcomes and impact, and let's remember to do the storytelling of how these programs touched real people on a daily life. One example is today we're running one, and it's by coincidence, it's on the nutrition incentive program, and it's just interviewing people at a farmer's market who are getting double the volume of fruits and vegetables with the coupons that they get from that. And then that's important, powerful things to remind people this is real Californians living everyday life. These are making a difference so that in the future when there's funding, we have those opportunities.
I'll help you out a little bit with the talking points here. So when cutting water storage, you have to stress that there's still Prop 1 funding that's coming for the water storage projects, right?
There is, and just today, there's another benchmark that's been accomplished for Sites Reservoir as a result of the governor's streamlining legislation that passed last year. So this is the second time it's really helping something like a water project. So stay tuned. Those dollars are there, they're secure, those projects are on the ground and working, and they've received some federal dollars to help make sure that we can make that happen.
Great. And so another thing I want to check in with you that I've talked with you about over the years is regulatory costs, the cost of reporting, of monitoring, all these different agencies asking for different stuff. You've been working on this through a centralized hub. I was hoping you can talk a little bit about, give us a little update on that. Yeah.
So, a long story, but 2 years ago, the governor got really excited when I made this proposal about a small-scale project to see if we could do something to really focus on paperwork, the compliance and reporting aspect. It's not about circumventing, what the labor protections are, environmental protection. He got very excited about that. Well, it's taken a very long, curvy road. We have a third-party consultant who's put out a very dense report. The one thing that it's doing is documenting very clearly for all of the people that routinely say, agriculture's not regulated. I encourage them to take a look at this as an objective analysis of all the regulations that a farmer of all sizes has to comply with. And I don't know that there's an easy way of getting to a realignment project, but the goal of this, working with the State Water Board, is to focus on the Irrigated Ag Lands Program, the Food Safety Modernization Act, and take a look at where we can do some streamlining, some consolidated reporting, and obviously there's going to have to be a technology update. If people could pre-populate all those reports, you know, it's the small things like that of trying to get to, but of course that requires investment. But the report is out. The month of June, there'll be 4 different public workshops to receive additional input. Will be some other roundtables to make sure we're getting to all corners of the state, small farmer perspective, historically underserved farmer perspective, UC Cooperative Extension, what they see and what they hear from their people. And then we won't have a final report until the first quarter of 2025. But it's a place to point to. It hasn't been funded by anybody but the state of California to say what are the regulations that a farmer has to do. And I go back to my Jerry Brown days when I used to go out with him in the first year or two, and farmers would say, we're overregulated. I can't solve overregulation. Give me a specific problem, and I'll tell Karen to go solve it. I think it's really important when farmers say, we're so overregulated, we take the time to say, at last count, I have to comply with 167 different regulations. Labor, hazard waste, fire, health, water. I mean, I think we have to get very specific for people to understand what small business could possibly get through that.
I think you just described everything I cover in my job, 167 different issues all at once.
Now we see it's worth every penny, Sarah.
So also on the regulatory front, so we have some big mandates, big climate goals coming down the pike here. Things are coming up pretty quick here. We have less incentive funding going into it. I know that you've talked with a lot of different groups who are looking to kind of find some flexibility with those goals. Can you share a little bit of what those conversations are like?
I don't know that there's any flexibility in the goals today. I will also say this is also first time in my life that while our incentive dollars are going down, they're still on a 3-year path of that will still be working. And in the meantime, there's over $20 billion new funding just for the conservation work of climate smart agriculture out of USDA. So one of the things we did early on with our programs was invest in technical assistance to make sure farmers could learn about what the practices are and where there would be incentives or matching fund programs. And we have a memorandum of understanding with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, UC Cooperative Extension, the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, to be seamless in being able to provide a farmer. There's these incentive programs at the state level, there's these incentive programs at the federal level, and our goal is to also look at businesses and opportunities for private funding to be able to point people in those directions, especially in healthy soils. A lot of interest in that. So that hopefully we can keep people drawing down dollars out of that conservation title and those funds that are available there. When it comes to the goals that are being set, a lot of those are done through the Air Resources Board. They have tremendous experience. They have world-class methodology. They're noted on a global basis for their expertise to set goals based on real feasibility, but there is always that provision in everything that CARB does about technically feasible and economically feasible. And so that's, you know, that's where we are on this, but I don't see anything signaling to CARB or the state of California that now's the time to back off before we're actually achieving the goals that have been set thus far. Obviously, what's in the pipeline with technology, what's in the pipeline with EVs and heavy-duty trucks, those are things that the calculations of the CARB staff, because they have access to highly proprietary, confidential information to do their modeling, we'll see. I wish I could give you more detail, but that's part of the behind-the-curtain stuff that not even we have access to.
Well, okay, so getting back into your wheelhouse then, I'm going to change subjects then. Something near and dear to you is dairy emissions. So we just got a feed additive approved last week. We've
Kind of approved, yeah.
Kind of approved. Okay, we're on the journey. What can we expect next from the state?
Yeah. So our folks have had a number of calls with FDA, and it's the way FDA characterized it. This is yet another example of our regulations will never move as quickly as markets do, or nowadays as fast as technology itself moves. And so FDA has only two pathways, and they still look at this additive as a drug, but they had I'm not characterizing this in the right vocabulary, but no protest. It can be used as a feed additive. There's no ability to make a claim on enteric fermentation, methane reduction. There's no guidance as of yet of amounts or feed blending. Those are all things to be worked out. And what this really underscores is how important it is for Congress to pass the Innovative Feed Act that would actually provide that alternative pathway for food and drug for this or other products in the future to be able to modernize their regulatory framework for that. I'd love to see something similar at Department of Pesticide Regulation for biological opportunities for pest management that could get commercialized faster as well.
So I'm trying to scan through all the questions coming through. Yeah. Did you want to pick one? No, you can't. So let me, hang on a second. I had a good one here. So there's a lot of discussion about lists, resources. I think Steve will have to jump on that with some press releases for you. The wolf compensation program, this is a big one that's come up lately from all our cattle folks, all our ranchers out there.
And that's at the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, you have any ideas on it, whether that's going to get any new funding?
If it was one-time funding, I'm not overly optimistic, but I don't have their budget. I don't have access to that. I mean, it's out publicly, whatever it is.
Got it. Yeah. So mitigating local businesses from closing or moving out of state to higher costs and regulations. This kind of gets to some of the rural development stuff that we've been talking about some this morning as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's just a fact to have to be acknowledged that there are a multitude of reasons why people might completely relocate to another state. I think a lot of what I have witnessed I'll start with dairy, over the last 10 years. Consolidation is a march that's been going on since the 1950s, and we've clearly seen that in the California dairy sector. And it's been the next generation where that growth in the good old days would have all happened here on this land with this water, and there are some constraints to that. And so I've seen families with the next generation take growth to another state, but they're not completely leaving California. I talk to a lot of people that would prefer to put all of their investment in California because it is a great place to grow things, but they have to look at these business costs. They also have to respond to, I know from some of my friends in produce, they're buyers. Like when we had two massive historic droughts almost back to back to back, starting in 2014 and then again in 2017, 2018, that their suppliers are asking them to locate some growing in different markets. That can be for just portfolio management on their part, but it's also because transportation is the biggest piece of many businesses' greenhouse gas emission and cost of groceries is transportation. So I think there's a multitude of reasons for that. I would lots rather see all of the families here invest in the next generation of the next farm, the next processing plant. Many of them are now doing it just south of the border. Again, that's a cost issue. It's also the growth in Peru and imports from Peru. A lot of that is California and U.S. owned horticulture growers that are just, it's a management portfolio, it's a risk management portfolio, and it's giving them year-round seasons. And they're taking their practices, their innovation, their food safety with it so that hopefully we keep growing markets for produce and we can keep supplying it on a year-round basis. I can't fix a big general question like that. I just have to acknowledge that it's very real and that there are many reasons why these decisions are being made. These are very strong contributing factors.
So we got a juicy one that just popped up. Can you comment on the disagreement between CACASA, the County Ag Commissioners Association, and DPR?
Well, all families sometimes need counseling. And I will say the one thing I wish hadn't happened is that it played out in a publication. It was not helpful in the relationship. Secretary Garcia and I signed a letter back to CACASA just acknowledging receipt of the letter, that we have shared goals, that our relationship's too important, all of us working together. I can't run my programs without ag commissioners. They are absolutely essential to the work that we do on pest eradication, on pest monitoring, on exclusion activities, and they're also absolutely essential for pesticide enforcement. There have been some communication issues. There have been, I think, people feeling that the priorities aren't exactly aligned. And so we're committed to working with CACASA and the ag commissioners and the leadership of our Ag Commissioners Association to make sure that this is not only a functional relationship, that it is a good one with alignment of priorities and our approaches for how to accomplish them. I feel sad that one of the disagreements has been about timelines and expectations on local community, social justice, environmental justice, outreach, and engagement. I think it's the only way that we can succeed doing business in this state, and being able to localize that outreach is the most important strategy I can think of for the success of our programs and the betterment of our communities in general.
Okay, thanks for that. So rounding out our discussion here, are there any last thoughts when it comes to resilience for agriculture that you would like to share?
Yeah. So we've done a lot of plans around climate adaptation, extreme heat, drought resiliency. I'm talking we as the collective multi-agency approach on this, and our water supply strategy. And we have bits and pieces of climate smart ag and the essential role of California agriculture in providing healthy, nutritious food with the best practices available. And we're pulling those together, and then we'll be going through listening sessions the rest of this year to create a California Ag Resiliency Plan. I hope this aligns very closely with the work that we're hoping to begin soon with UC and CSU on a master plan for agricultural research, education, and really think about the science that we need and where we need it that aligns with our climate goals, but most importantly with improving the health outcomes of all of our citizens with the kind of work that we heard about at the panel earlier today. So that'll be a work in progress in addition to our many other things that we have going on, because state budgets will be here and they'll change and funding will come back in different ways. But I feel that if we have good plans, and we do have those opportunities to make investment, we will have a plan for that, in addition to the work that we've invested in healthy food programs through our Farm to Fork office, working with our sister agencies to really map out where the investments have gone and where are the needs for continued investment in local resilient food supply chain issues. So I'm looking forward to working on those two things while we have a lull in new funding, but we still have lots of grants out in the field that we'll be verifying and closing down and collecting the data to tell the story for next year's funding and the year after that and the year after that.
Great. It
Okay.
does sound exciting. I'm excited.
It's good work. It's important work.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed this.
Nice to see you, Brad, as it always is. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah.